Hi, it's Ileana. So, I've been doing some research about the original history of the Anunnaki, where the original Anunnaki came from, and they are Sirian-Nibiruaian Anunnaki that were helping to facilitate the evolution on Earth. For Atlantis, for Egypt, they were Sirian-Nibiruaian. They were the Sirian-Nibiruaian Council of Anunnaki. So it wasn't Enki, Enlil, or Marduk that are the original Anunnaki. They're the resistance Anunnaki movement that infiltrated the Sirian-Nibiruaian Council of Anunnaki, eventually on Earth. There's also the Templar Anu groups that infiltrated Atlantis and so forth. And apparently the Aya bloodline of Enki, Enlil, and Marduk, they're the ones that came here 450,000 years ago to mine for the gold, basically, to create a slave race of humans and the Gigi reptilian other race to mine for gold because they needed it for their own planet's atmosphere, supposedly Nibiru, to re-energize the atmosphere of the planet with the gold, with that gold to sustain the life on that planet. So they were coming here to mine Earth's natural gold resources by genetically altering the primates of the caveman civilizations that were living on Earth. To do that through energetic DNA transference to upgrade them to Homo erectus and then Homo sapiens to mine the gold. But so Enlil was in control of that project, telling Enki what to do to modify the caveman beings, the primates. And Enki was doing unlawful experiments in the genetic modification. He wasn't supposed to give them so much intelligence, so much this, so much that. I mean, what he wrote into the DNA coding back then is very interesting. And eventually he gave them the right to procreate, but that was denied to the original genetically modified humans with the genetic DNA transference. It was all done through energy, shifting of energy of their frequency to give them three-stranded DNA, which they later lost, and it became two-stranded when the Earth went through all of its changes. It's a very interesting history. So we're going to look at that in exploring Ashiana Dean's Voyager series, Volume 1 and 2, the history of the original Anunnaki, then what came down with Enlil, Enki, and Marduk. And Marduk actually almost destroyed Mars and Earth with nuclear-type weapons because Enki and Enlil weren't letting him have his time to rule the Earth. They were ignoring him, and Marduk is the son of Enki, actually. So he unleashed these nuclear weapons on the Earth, and it destroyed a lot of their transportational port cities and landing ports in the coastal areas where the Anunnaki had their outposts to live and mine for the gold. So in the end, a huge outpost and a space station on Mars was also destroyed, and that's what Marduk was in charge of. And he came back to Earth, and he was basically didn't win. he lost, but he took out a lot of cities and stuff on Earth and caused a lot of nuclear type damage. They had to rebuild. And Enlil was the one that was ordering Enki to change the primates into Adamic man or Adamic slaves. And Enki was doing a lot of genetic manipulation, which again, according to the galactic laws, he had no right to do that. They had no right to interfere with evolving humanoids on Earth, the primitives. So that changed the history and course of Earth evolution because of that. But they weren't the original Anunnaki. It was the Sirian-Nibiruaian Council of Anunnakis that lived on Earth, and they were quite evolved, living with other species. So we will also have a look at how the Galactic Federation, or it's the same thing, Galactic Federation of Worlds, was involved with the whole protection of Earth, association with the Anunnaki, and there is a history between the Galactic Federation of Worlds and the Sirian-Nibiruaian Council of Anunnaki, and then also with the rest of the stuff that happened on Earth and Atlantis falling. There's a whole connection to that. So we'll have a closer look at that as well. It's very interesting history, and we'll explore that in the Voyager series through Ashiana Dean's book series. Hi, it's Ileana, and today we are going to look at Ashiana Dean's Voyager's book series, The Sleeping Abductees, Volume 1 of the Emerald Covenant CDT plate translation, and then also Volume 2. It has been brought to my attention that Ashiana Dean has a lot of information about the Galactic Federation of Worlds, what she calls the Galactic Federation, about the Anunnaki, and also the agendas of the Greys, the Zetas, and what they had been up to, because they had wanted to use basically the Grey hybridization program of using human genetics and splicing it with the Zetas and other Grey genetics to create human Grey hybrids to infiltrate the Earth as part of basically regaining their original DNA blueprint, bringing it back because it was failing and they were on the verge of extinction. So Ashiana talks about that in this book, and how they had plans to infiltrate the Earth to put themselves on the new Earth, and that was a 10-year plan. So that's included in these volume series. I found that information interesting. So, you know, it's worth looking at. And then she also talks about how people should be careful with channeling and contacting different Anunnaki groups and stuff. She talks about that in this volume, that channeling could be a system of receiving messages from beings that can have multiple agendas. She discusses that in this book, and even telepathic communication, that can be dangerous if you're in contact with the wrong group or beings. Then they can send influences and messages to us that is not of the highest good. So that's in these volumes. There's information about Atlantis, all the seeders and founder races, the Galactic Alliance, Galactic Federation of Worlds, Ashiana Dean. These books are very profound. They were written in 2000 and published. She started writing them in the late 1990s and published in the 2000s. And volume 1 is 293 pages. So this is what it looks like. This is the second edition. I'm just going to do a search for Galactic Federation and see what comes up, because she calls it that, and today we call it Galactic Federation of Worlds. And beside that, there's going to be the information about the Anunnaki. So I'm going to do a keyword search because this book is big, and start with Galactic Federation. Here I have this already set up, and let's see, click next. Okay, so this pops up Galactic Federation, Ashtar Command, and it pops in Pleiadian-Nibiruaian Anunnaki. We're going to go up a little bit, and we're going to start with Galactic Alliance Signet Council 5 because this is where this begins, and it describes the connection between the Anunnaki and the Galactic Federation and what happened there. So we're going to start with that. Galactic Alliance Signet Council 5, the Council of Alcyon, Pleiades, Guardians of D5, Pleiadian, Alcyon, Stargate 5, a Council in Crisis, Emerald Order, Terran MC, Iani Priests of Ur, and Anuhazi Feline Hominid Gold Order, Seraphia, Seraphim Hominid Avian, Oraphim, Saras, and Amethyst Order, Brahma, Cetacean, Inu, co-governing body. So that is what the Galactic Alliance Signet Council 5 is. There's many councils. She lists them all here. This is one of them. Governing Command Committee is Emerald Gold Order, Ashalum Command. Second Command Committee was Ashtar Command, which is made up of the Amethyst Order, Rama, overseeing rehabilitating Anunnaki races that entered the Emerald Covenant. Once included the Sirian-Nibiruaian Anunnaki organizations participating in bioregenesis through the Emerald Covenant. Anunnaki branches of the Alcyon Council are referred to as the Ruby Order, Anu, Elohim, and Anunnaki. Ruby Order groups include the Nibiruaian Councils of 9, 12, and 24, the Pleiadian-Nibiruaian Anunnaki Galactic Federation, Archangel Michael Collective, Ashtar Command, and the Anu Mesoldek Legions. Many Ruby Order Emerald Covenant defectors, including Galactic Federation, I'm assuming this is what we now call Galactic Federation of Worlds, Ashtar Command, the Archangel Michael Matrix, Anu Mesoldeks, and the Pleiadian-Nibiruaian Anunnaki were responsible for the manipulation, so they were responsible for the manipulation and digression of the earthly angelic human lineage since 25,500 BC. Again, they were responsible for manipulation and digression of the earthly angelic human lineage since 25,500 BC. These groups temporarily rejoined the Emerald Covenant during the 1992 Sirian-Pleiadian agreements and entered the Guardians' July 5, 2000 Treaty of Altair. On September 12, 2000, the majority of these groups defected from the GA Signet Council 5 Alcyon Council to join the United Resistance with draconian fallen angelic legions in promotion of the Earth Pole Shift agenda. Some groups accepted amnesty contracts from the GA and another governing body called the IAFW, remaining in the Emerald Covenant. It is very difficult for humans to detect what agenda affiliation these groups may now have. Caution is advised in contact or channeling communication. There you go. That's the beginning, and there's much more here. So that's the first search concerning Galactic Federation, Ashtar Command, and Anunnaki. They were part of the Guardian Alliance Signet Council 5. Now we're going to go to Book 2 and Volume 2 of Voyagers and see what further information Ileana can provide us about the Galactic Federation and the different groups of the Anunnaki. This is Volume 2 of The Secrets of Amante, Voyagers, for the Emerald Covenant CDT plate translations. So that's Voyagers, The Secrets of Amante, Volume 2 by Ashiana Dean. And again, we're looking at the Galactic Federation and Anunnaki. And we're going to go to page 41, I believe. That's the first page where it's mentioned. Yeah. So here we are, Galactic Federation, to serve as a guardian and educator race for Earth humans of the second and third seedings, and they became heavily involved with old Sumerian Egyptian cultures as well as that of Atlantia and Atlantis. And we're going to hear about that on page 59. Let's have a look. Okay. Let's have a look here. Yeah, so it's previous. Okay, next. Yeah, so here we are. We're going to go back to page 59 here. See how the Galactic Federation and Anunnaki were involved. So this is Giza to Atlantis. Anunnaki of the Sirian Council and Earth Protection, the first building of the Great Pyramid of Giza and the Sphinx, the Ankh's outpost on Mars, first birth wave of Mesoldec Cloister, and reestablishment of the Law 1. 48,500 to 35,000 years ago. Following the relocation of the Ark of the Covenant 51,750 years ago. So basically this says following the relocation of the Ark of the Covenant 55,750 years ago, Egyptian culture prospered and Egypt became a center for the Anu, Mesoldec, Hebrew, and Saras Egyptian guardians of the Ark of the Covenant. Atlantean culture also prospered as the generator crystals were once again restored to operation after being put out of service during the Lemurian cataclysm 52,000 years ago. The generator crystals were once again charged with multi-dimensional frequency using the Ark of the Covenant in Egypt. So the Ark of the Covenant is like a portal technology, and also it's charging generator technology. Through this period of rebuilding and expansion, the influence of the Templar Anu, whose genetic line had been contaminated by the Templar seal through interbreeding with members of the Anunnaki Resistance, continued to spread, creating a growing chasm between races serving the Law 1 and those falling under the influence of the Anunnaki Resistance. Templar Solar initiates creed. In Egypt, the Templar Anu were at first met with resistance to this influence, and many of them relocated to Atlantis, where the Templar Anu had a stronger hold over the cultural environment. The Templar Anu of Atlantis began using their influence to corrupt the Atlantean priest caste, and eventually the social and moral climate in Atlantis declined under their influence. Motivated by the Anunnaki Resistance, the Templar Anu began to dominate the races of Atlantean culture and made plans to conquer the lands of the inner earth. They planned to use the generator crystals to break through the electromagnetic barrier which protected the portals of the inner earth. Concerned for the welfare of the inner earth civilizations and the high concentration of Anu Mesoldecs residing there. So again, concerned for the welfare of the inner earth civilizations and the high concentration of Anu Mesoldecs residing there, the Anunnaki of the Sirian Council petitioned the Interdimensional Association of Free Worlds for permission to make a show of strength on Earth, offering the races protection against increasing Anunnaki resistance infiltration. Permission was granted in the Sirian-Arcturian Coalition for Interplanetary Defense was called in to assist in the protective mission. The primary target for Anunnaki resistance manipulation was the area in which the Ark of the Covenant was located, so Egypt became the focus of Sirian Council activity. Anunnaki of the Sirian Council were first sent to the planet Mars to recreate an observational outpost that had been constructed there during the 1,000 Years' War, which they hoped would intimidate the Anunnaki resistance from further interference with Earth. Inundated by the presence of the Sirian Council, the Anunnaki resistance escalated their involvement with Atlantis and began a resurgence of their influence in Egypt, posing a greater threat to the security of the Ark of the Covenant. About 48,500 years ago, the Sirian Council instructed their Anunnaki members to make a direct show of power in Egypt and Atlantis. Anunnaki of the Sirian Council visited these civilizations en masse, reasserting the influence of the Law of One and driving many Templar Anu out of Egypt and back to Atlantis, where they would pose less threat to the Ark of the Covenant. In Egypt and in several other locations on the globe, the portals of the inner earth were fortified as the Sirian Council Anunnaki built bases of operation on the Earth's surface, directly over the portal regions. The pyramid structure was a trademark of Anunnaki architecture and scientific achievement, and several small pyramid structures were constructed above portal passage areas throughout Egypt. The greatest of these operations bases was constructed over the main Egyptian portal opening to the inner earth, through which the Ark of the Covenant portal could be accessed. At the same time, another massive structure was constructed over the nearby portal of the Ark of the Covenant. The first monument to be created was the original Sphinx. This building covered the portal to the inner earth and linked directly into the portal passage that led to the Ark of the Covenant. The Sphinx was designed following Anunnaki heritage, having the head of an Anunnaki warrior placed upon the body of a lion-like sculpture. The lion's body of the Sphinx was a symbolic tribute to a race of beings from the Hu-2 known as the Leonines, humanoid worlds, so Hu-2, who were instrumental in laying the early foundations of Anunnaki culture. The Leonine beings of Hu-2, who were large, upright, fur-covered felines of advanced intelligence, were revered as godlike by the early Anunnaki civilizations, and the Anunnaki of the Sirian Council paid tribute to this heritage. The Anunnaki of the Sirian Council drew strength and comfort from their affiliation with the Leonine people, and by constructing this monument intended to show the power of the Anunnaki united and built upon their Leonine ancestral allies. The symbolic design of the Sphinx was intended to show the Anunnaki resistance that they were alone in their conquest, and that the true Anunnaki heritage stood behind the Anunnaki of the Sirian Council. So in that the true Anunnaki heritage stood behind the Anunnaki of the Sirian Council. In practical terms, the Sphinx was constructed to serve as a fortification for the inner earth portal, and also as a safe house and library for the storage of sacred records and texts. It also served the purpose of housing the great energy transmitting machines that were charged with UHF fifth dimensional energy from the Ark of the Covenant, and the smaller ankhs, which were infused with energy in a similar fashion. Historically, the larger machines became known as Arks of the Covenant, and the true identity of the Ark of the Covenant as being a portal bridge was lost. But during the time of the original building of the Sphinx, the truth of the Ark of the Covenant was well known, and the objects were understood as tools which could draw, hold, and transmit energy that was drawn through the Ark of the Covenant from the blue flame of Amante that was stored in the Andromeda galaxy. Both the large and small tools were designed in the shape of the Ankh, which allowed high-frequency energy to be synthesized in specific ways, following the natural laws of interdimensional energy mechanics. The Ankhs were used to create the Sphinx, various pyramids, and other structures, as they provided the power to reverse gravitational pull and directly affect the particle makeup and morphogenic fields of Earth matter substance. They served as major construction tools, weather modulators, healing tools, and as interdimensional transit devices. The original Sphinx served as a protective fortress in which these devices could be stored and kept out of the hands of the Templar Anu. The second major construction of the Sirian Council Anunnaki was a massive pyramid centered directly over the portal opening to the Ark of the Covenant. This pyramid was originally constructed during the same time period as the Sphinx, about 48,459 years ago, about 46,459 BC. The reconstruction of this pyramid, which occurred about 12,550 years ago, 10,500 BC, then again about 11,000 years ago, 9,000 BC, is what has come to be known in the modern times as the Great Pyramid of Giza, the Cheops Pyramid. This structure was reconstructed and repaired on numerous occasions. It was designed and erected by the Anunnaki of the Sirian Council, the Anu-Mezeldecs, Hebrew, and Saras-Egyptian peoples from that time period. The pyramid was not constructed to serve as a burial tomb, though much later it was used as such. The primary purpose of the Great Pyramid of Giza was to fortify the portal of the Ark of the Covenant and to serve as an interdimensional teleportation center. The original pyramid was designed as a harmonic resonance chamber through which multidimensional frequency bands could be pulled in from deep space and from the planetary core of Sirius B, using a great Ankh positioned directly below a crystalline capstone. Through the power of the Ankh, a tremendous amount of UHF energy was pulled into focus within the capstone of the pyramid, then projected downward through the structure into the second dimensional frequency bands. The pyramid and Ark of the Covenant were situated upon Earth's geographical center point within the energy vortex that represented the heart chakra within Earth's planetary bioenergetic system. This vortex allowed energy exchange to take place between Earth and the fourth dimensional frequency bands. By creating a harmonic resonance chamber within such an interdimensional vortex, the D2 overtones of Hu1, humanoid 1, could be combined with the base tones of D4, Hu2 energies. So Hu1 is humanoids, human planets, human energy, forming an interdimensional resonant tone through which visiting craft traveling from Sirius B and other star systems could enter and leap through time, making transit to Earth almost instantaneous. The Great Pyramid was created to allow immediate intervention of the Sirian Council and Galactic Federation fleets should the Ark of the Covenant come under Anunnaki Resistance attack. While the pyramid was in operation as an interstellar teleport station, it served as the greatest deterrent to an Anunnaki Resistance invasion. The Great Pyramid was used as an active interstellar teleport station from the time of its construction, 48,459 years ago, to about 30,000 years ago, about 28,000 BC, when an explosion in Atlantis caused Earth to tilt slightly on its axis, knocking the pyramid's D4 vortex, Earth's heart chakra, out of its previous alignment with the vortex systems of Sirius B and several other planetary systems to which it had been originally aligned. ET visitation was commonplace in Egypt prior to this misalignment of the Earth's grid, but following this event, transit from other star systems required more time and resources, so visitation became much less frequent. Throughout the height of its operation, 46,459 BC to 28,000 BC, the Great Pyramid of Giza was also used as an ascension chamber for the select few who possessed the required DNA assembly in favor of the Elohim. Such individuals were allowed passage through the Ark of the Covenant if the Elohim approved and opened the passageway, and some were able to ascend to Tara. The pyramid was used as a training school for initiates to the Mesoldec Elohim Ascension Program, and also for healing, accelerating genetic assembly, and for passage into the inner earth portals beneath the Sphinx. The pyramid was always kept under tight security by the resident Anunnaki of the Syrian Council, and the Templar Anu were banned from entering the premises. This created much hostility between the Templar Anu and the Egyptian cultures operating under the protection of the Syrian Council Anunnaki. The Anunnaki of the Syrian Council developed a strong hold in Egypt for a time, creating a system of pyramids and other structures that housed a network of power points through which energy was drawn from the great crystals of Atlantis through the Earth's grid lines and into desired locations. About 35,000 years ago, the pure Mesoldec cloister race began their first full birthing wave into human civilization, reinforcing the teachings of the Log One in bringing their fifth DNA strand potentials to the human genetic pool. Guardianship of the Ark of the Covenant was slowly turned over from the Syrian Council Anunnaki to the Anu Mesoldecs, Cloister Mesoldecs, Hebrew hybrids of fifth race Cloister Hebiru and the sixth race Cloister Mesoldecs, created through the host matrix, transplants of the second seeding and the Saras Egyptians, all of whom became members of the early Egyptian priestcraft. Since the times of their creation, the sphere of Amati, 550 million years ago, and the Ark of the Covenant, 840,000 years ago, were the primary foci of human evolution, as the purpose and process of the human evolutionary imprint was held within the secrets of Amati. Guardian Alliance and Galactic Federation intervention. 28,000 BC, 10,000 BC. The Templar Anu grew progressively more hostile within the territories under Syrian Council protection, and many relocated to Atlantis, which was becoming the Templar Anu stronghold. Angered that they were not permitted to enter the inner earth or use the Ark of the Covenant, the Templar Anu devised a plan to conquer the inner earth territories by using the Atlantean crystal generators to tear down the electromagnetic barriers that secured the inner earth portals. The Templar Anu began their conquest from the continent of Atlantis, but quickly discovered the inner earth portal shields could not be easily destroyed. As they forced excessive power through one of their main generator crystals, the crystal unit exploded with more than 10 times the force of an atomic bomb. Several other smaller generators also exploded, ripping apart the continent of Atlantis and sending the majority of its land mass under the sea. Following the explosions of 30,000 years ago, 28,000 BC, the Atlantean landmass was reduced to 3 islands and most of its populations were destroyed. Just prior to the explosion, the Syrian Council removed various groups from Atlantis, distributing them throughout various locations on the globe, many being taken to Egypt for resettling. The Egyptians were forewarned of the coming event, and most of the culture retreated underground into inner earth communities, finding shelter from the earth changes that would result from the explosions. During the explosions in Atlantis, the earth was tilted slightly on its axis, throwing the earth's grid out of balance, breaking the energetic link between the Pyramid of Giza and Sirius B. The Great Pyramid could no longer function as an interstellar teleport station. The Ark of the Covenant remained stable, but surface conditions were thrown into chaos once again. The pole tilt created massive flooding in many places throughout the globe, and the rearrangement of some land masses. Once surface conditions stabilized, the races returned to the surface to rebuild, while the Anunnaki Resistance collected the Templar Anu they had rescued and placed them back upon the islands of Atlantis, helping them to reconstruct their civilization. Anunnaki of the Sirian Council remained in Egypt, then extended their influence into Atlantean island territory, returning the Atlantean and Anu Mesoldep survivors they had exiled in the inner earth to the Atlantean islands, while slowly swaying a good percentage of the Atlantean Templar Anu to give up their Anunnaki resistance affiliation. Though the Law of One was beginning a resurgence in the Atlantean island cultures between 30,000 to 12,500 years ago, 28,000 BC to 10,500 BC, the Anunnaki of the Sirian Council and the Ark of the Covenant, which they continue to protect, remain more vulnerable to Anunnaki resistance infiltration because the Galactic Federation and Sirian Council fleets could no longer instantaneously come to Earth's defense due to the disruption of the Giza Pyramid teleport station. Around 12,500 years ago, 10,500 BC, the Anunnaki Resistance, angered by the loss of their stronghold in Atlantis, launched an aggressive airstrike against the Sirian Council Anunnaki outpost on Mars, and then in Egypt, in an attempt to destroy the Ark of the Covenant and claim dominion over the Earth civilization. The Martian outpost was destroyed. The Sirian Council and various interstellar allies squelched the takeover attempt and drove the Anunnaki Resistance fleet out of Earth's vicinity to the distant planet of Nibiru. But they did not arrive in time to prevent the destruction of the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx, and various other cultural centers in Egypt. But they did not arrive in time to prevent the destruction of the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx, and various other cultural centers in Egypt. The portal bridge of the Ark of the Covenant survived the attack, as did the inner Earth territories, but following this brief onslaught of 10,500 BC, the Pyramid, Sphinx, and other Egyptian structures had to be rebuilt. The Atlantean islands were not directly involved in these attacks, though Resistance loyal Templar Anu created minor uprisings against their Sirian Council loyalist relatives until word of the Resistance defeat drove them into temporary underground seclusion. The Atlantean islands continued on with mounting tensions between the two groups, and by 9,500 BC, the Resistance loyal Templar Anu had once again regained their stronghold in Atlantis. In Egypt, following the Resistance attack, the Sirian Council Anunnaki, Anu Mesoldep, Cloister Mesoldep, and Saras Egyptians rebuilt the primary structures of their civilization. The Ankhs, which had been hidden in the inner earth during the raid, were again brought to the surface, and the Great Pyramid of Giza, the Sphinx, and several new structures were rebuilt. The Sphinx and Great Pyramid were placed in their previous locations, marking the fortification of the Ark of the Covenant and the inner earth portals. The Great Pyramid was slightly realigned in order to create a harmonic resonance link with the Pleiadian star system through the planet Alcyone, which would allow the structure to be used once again as an interstellar teleport station. Because of the disturbances of the Earth grid that occurred during the Atlantean explosions 30,000 years ago, 28,000 BC, the original alignment with the Sirius B system could not be reestablished. The third Eye of Horus portal bridge to Sirius B did remain operational for smaller scale visitations. The Earth was now more closely in alignment with the interstellar energy spirals that ran through the Pleiadian system, and so the new pyramid was oriented to an energetic alignment with Alcyone. So let's have a look where we see Galactic. So then we have the sinking of Atlantis, the ending of open ET relations, and the withdrawal of ET technologies, premature openings of the Ark of the Covenant, and descent of the sphere of Amati, Earth's quarantine, DNA mutation, and the creation of the ego and the higher self. So Galactic Federation is mentioned in 9,558 BC to 8,000 BC. Following the 28,000 BC explosion in Atlantis, which reduced the continent of Atlantis to a small landmass of 3 islands in the area of what is now called the Bermuda Islands. The Guardian races continued open visitation with the cultures of Earth using the Alcyon interdimensional spiral and the Great Pyramid teleport station for easy access to Earth. The AT visitors and occasionally inter-time travelers from future Tara and past and future Earth shared open commerce with human cultures, showing their influence in various locations around the globe. As the primary teleport station was located in Egypt, Egyptian culture was strongly affected and influenced by ET visitation. Many of their late depiction of gods originated from these early days of direct relationship with a wide variety of extraterrestrial beings. The Sirian Council of HU2 and the Galactic Federation and Sirian and the Sirian-Arcturian Coalition for Interplanetary Defense of Hu1, along with several other Guardian allies, held the Alcyon Spiral and Egyptian teleport station under high security. The Anunnaki Resistance, the Draco, their allies, or any other groups not authorized by the Sirian Council were not permitted to access the Alcyon Spiral for Earth visitation. Unauthorized groups could, however, take the long way in using other intergalactic portals which connected to Earth's portal system. So, basically, a lot of these Anunnakis who defected weren't allowed to come in. So they had to take the long way out to get to Earth. Though these alternative routes of visitation demanded much more time and resources, they were still frequently used by other stellar cultures who also influenced the development of the races. The Anunnaki Resistance still occasionally infiltrated the Sirian Council security systems and secretly worked with members of the Templar Anu, primarily those in the Atlantean Islands. The Atlantean culture digressed into a torturous, elitist society run by the Templar Anu operatives of the Anunnaki Resistance, and due to their actions 11,558 years ago, Earth civilizations would be changed forever. The first major stumbling block to the Guardian race's awakening plan took place in 9,558 BC. The Templar Anu, motivated by the Anunnaki Resistance, devised a plan to take control of the Great Pyramid teleport station so the Resistance could have free access to the Alcyon Spiral. Their plan also included the destruction of the Sphere of Amante, for without the race morphogenic field, the souls of the races would be trapped in Hu1, their evolutionary imprint erased. The Resistance desired to use humanity as an experiment, creating a worker race that could supply them with Earth resources, primarily gold and several other mineral compounds. Okay, so the Anunnaki Resistance, this was Enki, Enlil, and Marduk, Ea bloodline, because they were the ones coming to mine the gold on Earth. This is how this fits. Okay. So, the Resistance desired to use humanity as an experiment, creating a worker race that could supply them with Earth resources, primarily gold and several other mineral compounds. Using Ankh tools pirated from the Anu mesodex of the inner Earth, the Templar Anu attempted to direct UHF fifth-dimensional energy from the Ankhs through the great crystal generators, which still remained operational in the Atlantean Islands, through the Earth's energetic grid and into the Ark of the Covenant portal bridge. They intended to send this high-powered electromagnetic pulse, EMP, through the Ark of the Covenant into the sphere of Amante that was held within a planetary core in the Andromeda Galaxy. Their erroneous calculations indicated that if they sent precise EM pulse patterns into the Ark of the Covenant, the sphere of Amante could be isolated as a target for destruction, and the blue flame morphogenic field for Tara could be released and returned through the Ark of the Covenant to be used as an inexhaustible source of power. With the blue flame staff of Amante under their control, the Anunnaki Resistance could easily orchestrate a massive Earth takeover, but the Templar Anu failed to access the frequency codes used by the Guardians to protectively seal the sphere of Amante against such attack, and that miscalculation became the downfall of Atlantis. When the Templar Anu sent their destroyer beam, EM Pulse, through the Ark of the Covenant, the EM Pulse intercepted the sphere of Amante with its security seal. The security seal would not allow the EM Pulse to travel into the Amante sphere, but instead created a double overtone frequency pattern that sent the EM Pulse into a state of fission. The exploding energies focused in the Andromeda galaxy quickly refracted off of the security seal on the sphere, replicated, intensified, then projected back down through the Ark of the Covenant, disseminated through the Earth grid, then refocused on their point of origin, the main crystal generator beneath the largest island of Atlantis. This process occurred almost instantaneously, causing a chain reaction explosion within most of the operational crystal generators. The Sirian Council discovered the plan too late and were unable to prevent the catastrophe. So they were unable to prevent the catastrophic event that happened, the catastrophe. But they were able to rescue several groups of Sirian Council loyalists from the Atlantean islands, transporting them via interdimensional craft to Egypt. Fleets rapidly scoured the Earth in the few hours prior to the explosions, warning the cultures to retreat underground and into the inner Earth civilizations, where they would find shelter and refuge from the deluge that would soon follow. Many people from many lands poured into the inner Earth portals. Some were not able to enter because the portals had to be closed, and so they perished. The portals and the underground passageways leading to them were sealed, closed from the inside, using the Ankh tools as Earth awaited the inevitable explosions. The first series of explosions blew apart the landmass of the largest Atlantean island, which triggered tectonic shifting beneath the ocean floor. This set off a series of explosions within the other crystal generators, decimating the landmass of the two remaining islands, sending them deep into the caverns beneath the ocean floor. Atlantis was removed from the face of the Earth into a watery grave within the caverns beneath the ocean floor. The explosions occurred in 9558 BC and resulted in yet another tilt of the Earth's axis, shifting of some global landmasses, a series of earthquakes, massive flooding in some locations. The flooding was not global as it had been during previous floods. The Giza teleport station was again thrown out of alignment as the Earth's vortex beneath it, Earth's heart chakra, no longer energetically lined up properly with the Alcyon spiral. Though portions of the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx, and several other structures did survive these earth changes, it would be many years before they were returned to their grandeur. The Guardian races had more pressing problems with which to contend. After the explosions beneath Atlantis ceased, the Sirian Council ordered the Sirian Blue race to remove the crystal generators, which had not exploded. The massive crystals were dredged from the ocean floor and returned to Sirius B. With the removal of the crystals, humanity's technological abilities were thrown into the dark ages, and the once glorious civilizations of Earth were reduced to primitive organizations based upon survival concerns and built through manual labor. Though the memory of advanced societal structure remained, its applications became impossible without the powers supplied through advanced extraterrestrial technologies. The crystals were removed as a safety precaution so more explosions did not ensue, but later it was decided that these technologies would not be returned to Earth till the races had evolved to a more mature comprehension of the proper use of power. But this was only the beginning of the problems humanity would face as a result of the sinking of Atlantis. Following the deluge, the Sirian Council placed further security seals on the Ark of the Covenant, which no longer permitted energy to be drawn from the blue flame in order to charge objects with UHF, fifth dimensional energy. 2 objects were charged prior to this sealing, so the Egyptian cultures would have a tool through which the inner earth portals could be opened. One object was a small cylindrical object, flat on one side and made of gold, which housed a small portion of the Earth's D2 morphogenic field, a small part of the orange gold flame of Earth's core. This object became known as the rod. The other object, also made of gold, was a staff about 3 feet long, containing several crystalline stones, which housed a minute portion of the blue flame morphogenic field. This object was called the staff. Though these objects did not have the power of the Ankhs, they enabled humans to enter the inner earth portals and could be used to facilitate healing, to influence weather patterns, and to access the portals of parallel Earth. The objects were stored within a lead-lined chest that was energetically charged with a frequency barrier, so the energies of the rod and staff could not escape. While the objects were in storage, the rod and staff and the Ankhs were placed in the custody of the Ano-Mesolducts from the inner earth, and the Ankhs were banned from being used by surface cultures. For a time, the rod and staff were used by the Egyptians who built the surface cultures, but later they were also banned from surface use and deactivated. Through time, the chest in which the rod and staff were stored became known as the traditional and current Ark of the Covenant, and the true meaning of the Ark of the Covenant and of the morphogenic flames of the D2 rod and the D5 staff became lost to all but a select few who remembered the true significance of these terms. The most treacherous problem created by this Atlantean misadventure was that the original seal on the Ark of the Covenant, which kept the sphere of Amante in place within the Andromeda planetary core, was sparked open by the EM pulse transmission from the Great Crystal. The sphere of Amante began its descent to Earth. The sphere of Amante could only be entered into the Earth core if the Earth grid vibrated high enough to hold the frequencies within it, and only during the dimensional blending periods inherent to the Earth's natural time cycles. The descent of the sphere from the Andromeda galaxy would take 2,000 years. Not only was the Earth grid unprepared to house its energies, but the timing of entry would be completely out of synchronization with Earth's natural cycles. Having been released into the Ark of the Covenant portal bridge in 9558 BC, the sphere of Amante would intercept Earth sometime in 7558 BC. It would not arrive in time for the dimensional blend period of 9048 BC and would arrive before the next dimensional blend period in 6835 BC. If the sphere of Amante attempted to enter Earth's three-dimensional body during a time period when Earth's fourth dimensional vortices were not opened, the sphere would explode upon impact with the natural frequency barrier that separates the third and fourth dimensions. This astral explosion would cause the Earth's fourth vortex chakra to collapse, which would systematically create a buildup of energy throughout the remaining vortices, and the Earth grid would explode. If the sphere passed through the astral plane and the frequency bands of the third dimension in 7550 BC, the Earth would be reduced to space dust. Interesting. In order to avert this pending Earth cataclysm, the Ra Confederacy, Paladorian and Sirian councils, Elohim, and several other Earth guardian groups devised a plan through which the Earth could be spared this premature demise. This plan was put in effect in 9540 BC. The Elohim were commissioned to alter the Earth's D2 morphogenic field in a way that would create a natural frequency fence or an energetic barrier surrounding the Earth through which the sphere of Amante would be unable to pass. Certain frequencies certain frequency patterns were removed from the Earth's morphogenic field, so the fourth dimensional frequencies could no longer plug into Earth's three-dimensional body. The 7th through the 12th base tones and 7th through the 9th overtones of the third dimensional frequency bands were taken out of Earth's morphogenic pattern. Without these frequencies, the fourth dimensional frequency bands could not connect to the Earth's three-dimensional body, so the sphere of Amante would be halted within the lowest frequency bands of the fourth dimension as the path of frequency through which it would descend into the third dimension was severed. It would remain in the astral plane until the three-dimensional frequencies were re-entered into the Earth's morphogenic field. Without those frequencies, the Earth would not be able to pull those frequencies of the specific tones into its planetary grid, so Earth would be halted in its tracks of time within the middle frequency bands of the third dimension. Though this protective measure was necessary at the time, it also stunted the planet's ability to evolve naturally out of HU1. The Guardians intended to release the frequency fence during an appropriate time cycle period once the Earth grid had rebalanced and its vibrational rate had increased enough to accept a rapid return of the sphere of Amante. So I gather that the sphere of Amante is some kind of energy balancing sphere for planetary alignment and such, to keep the balance of planets going. There were certain advantages and several drawbacks to this frequency fence. The 10th and the 12th overtones of the third dimension were left within the Earth's morphogenic field, which meant that a portion of Earth's particles would manifest within the 10th to 12th frequency bands of the third dimension. A higher vibrational Earth phantom was created into which the sphere of Amante could be released during an appropriate time cycle. Once the sphere was returned to the Earth phantom energy imprint, the higher three-dimensional aspects of the race awareness would be released from the D4 seal of Pallador and would be able to enter their race cloister after death. So part of the soul essence could return to the sphere of Amante to await the release of the fifth dimensional seal of Amante. This meant that in the dimensional blending period of 6,835 BC, the sphere of Amante could be entered into the 10th to 12th overtone frequency bands of D3, and from that point on, soul fragments would no longer become trapped in the D4 astral plane upon death. This was a definite advantage in terms of the evolution of consciousness. However, there were also some disadvantages created by the mechanics of the frequency fence. Interesting. So there was a frequency fence. The first disadvantage of the frequency fence was that the natural portal structures which allowed for interstellar transit into Earth would be cut off from the interdimensional grid. Interstellar visitors could enter their craft to the Earth phantom frequency bands, but could not easily enter onto the Earth's surface in the frequency bands below the frequency fence. Smaller, more adaptable vessels were needed to orchestrate visitation, and each time a vessel entered, it did so with the risk of disrupting the frequency fence, which could release the sphere of Amante from its storage place. The Elohim were put in charge of monitoring and protecting the frequency fence, and the Guardian organizations agreed that interstellar visitation to Earth would be strictly limited to emergency intervention. The Guardians adopted a policy of non-interference with earthly affairs, but continued to hold the frequency fence in place to preserve the integrity of the planet. It was decided that humans would be allowed to orchestrate their own affairs on Earth, with the Guardians attending to issues of evolutionary ascension from behind the scenes. Because the sphere of Amante was now in a location more vulnerable to resistance attack, extremely high security measures were taken to ensure that no one disrupted the sphere or breached the frequency fence without Guardian approval. In the beginning, this fortification of the fence was intended for security purposes, but later was used as an opportunity for the Elohim to extend favoritism to those humans carrying genetic strains more closely connected to their own morphogenic imprint. This gave an unfair evolutionary advantage to some humans, such as the Saros Egyptians and those of the Nibiru cloister, who had stronger genetic ties to the Elohim than many of the other races. The overall effect of the frequency fence and the security tactics used to enforce it was that the physical Earth and its peoples were put under galactic quarantine, losing all direct assistance from and relationship to the multidimensional intergalactic communities. Because of this quarantine, information that traveled through the frequency bands of the higher dimensions would no longer transmit into the Earth's grid and cellular memory. Not only would the race memory from the sphere of Amante be unavailable to humans upon the planet, but interdimensional communications from higher dimensional fields would also be curtailed, as higher frequency transmissions could not pass through the frequency fence. As generations of the races evolved beneath the frequency fence, previous memory of humanity's involvement with and genetic relationship to extraterrestrial civilizations faded, and the advantages of technological advancement those relationships allowed were lost. Due to implementation of the frequency fence in 9540 BC, Earth evolved under quarantine and humanity was cut off from its interstellar heritage. But this was not the only disadvantage that the frequency fence created for the human populations. The process of a soul essence birthing out of the morphogenic field, the sphere of Amante, involves the essence passing out of the morphogenic field and into the morphogenic field of the planet onto which it will birth. Once a soul essence has entered its planetary morphogenic field, it will then pass into the fetal pattern that was created for its entry, and fetal integration of the soul consciousness occurs. As the individualized morphogenic field of the soul essence passes through the planetary morphogenic field, picks up the frequency patterns characteristic to the planetary core, which allows the essence to ground its identity within the collective energy imprint of the planet. After the frequency fence was applied and some of the third dimensional tones were removed from the planetary morphogenic field, soul essences passing through the Earth core for birthing could not ground the full imprint for the third DNA strand, as the missing third dimensional tones would not allow the companion codes from the soul morphogenic field to plug into the Earth's morphogenic field. The DNA is created in physical terms as its already existing morphogenic imprint passes through the Earth core morphogenic field, where the energy imprint for the DNA then picks up the particle patterns from the Earth that will flesh out the DNA imprint in terms of the dense matter particles. So basically, from the Earth that will flesh out the DNA imprint in terms of dense matter particles. If certain frequencies tones are missing from the Earth core, those frequencies carried in the DNA imprint cannot flesh out into matter particles, and the DNA will manifest without those tones in its operational strands. The frequency fence caused the third DNA strand to manifest without the 7th through the 12th base tones and the 7th through the 9th overtones, which resulted in a genetic mutation for the human lineage, then dropping our DNA to two-stranded later on. So this is a whole process. Interesting. Okay. So this is the agreements with the Zetas and the Montauk Project. Zetas and Rigelian's Montauk Project, 1983 and 2976 AD. this is what I was talking about. By 1982, the Zetas became tremendously frustrated as they observed the continuing breakdown of their collective mind complex in the D4 time cycle and began to realize that the Guardians would correct the misalignment of the sun and time for the ascension period to proceed as scheduled between 1982 and 1984. Most members of the Zeta Legion entered into treaties with the Guardian races and agreed to stop their plan of Earth infiltration. These agreements also included the Zetas from the D4 time cycle, who had fallen under domination of the Dracos in that future time period. The Guardians agreed to relocate the Zeta races and their hybrids to another planetary system in D4, where they could evolve peacefully as long as the Zetas agreed to follow the dictates of the Sirian Council and Galactic Federation, and to operate upon principles of the Law of One from that time forward. The Zetas were also required to fully dismantle their collective mind complex in D4 to release the Zeta Seal frequency fence to assist the Guardians in preparing Earth and humanity for 2012. Interesting. So the Zetas were, in other grays, were doing the hybridization programs of having the human ET hybrids, grays, and that was dismantled. Though most of the Zetas agreed and began working with the Guardians in 1983, several Zeta and most Draco groups refused to release their desire for possession of Earth. These groups became known as the Draco Zeta Resistance, which included rebellious Zeta races, Dracos, and their hybrids. The primary Zeta groups that refuse Guardian treaties are the Zeta Greys from a solar system that orbits the star Rigel and the Orion star system. These are frequently called the Rigelians. We know them as the Futsi, pronounced Fushi. It is this Zeta group that formed treaties with the interior government on Earth and orchestrated the Zeta Seal manipulations of the sun. They are the most aggressive and militant of the Zeta Grey races and are extremely dangerous to humans because they often attempt to present themselves as guardians in order to seduce humans into being their earthly operatives. So there you go. Greys and the Grey hybridization programs. It mostly failed, but some of them did infiltrate. So yeah, interesting. That's that. So on August 16, 1987, the Harmonic Convergence, permission for Guardian intervention on Earth was granted. Bridge Zone project was set in motion. Guardians began keying Earth's vector vortices in 1987 in response to the event of the Harmonic Convergence. On 8/16/1987, the Sirian Council persuaded the Galactic Federation and other Q2 and Q3 groups to allow the Ascension program to be activated for the human populations. Permission was given for the Guardians to intervene and set the Bridge Zone project plan from 1984 in motion. Guardian groups began keying Earth's vortices with UHF seals to block intruder forces from using the vortex portals. Guardian and intruder forces began vying for control over Earth's vortices. Interesting. Okay, so now we have this interesting connection between what the Anunnaki were doing. This is the Anunnaki, the 1992 Pleiadian Sirian agreements, and fallen angelic ET races. So it talks about what agreements were made and what was broken. The Anunnaki races have had an intimate relationship with human evolution for many millions of years, and unfortunately this relationship has rarely demonstrated peaceful co-evolutionary objectives, like what Enki, Marduk, and Enlil did on Earth, genetically altering humans and using them as slaves, the Gigi reptilians being used as slaves to mine for gold. That was the Anunnaki Resistance. That's what they did. The Anunnaki race identity includes a variety of different interstellar races, all of which have one thing in common. They were originally created by and through a self-proclaimed anti-Christiatic fallen angelic collective called the Anu Elohim. Within the original text of this book, no differentiation was made between the Elohim feline hominid human Christos founders race and the fallen Anu Elohim, aquatic ape cetacean collective that took an anti-Christiatic stance against their Elohim kin 250 billion years ago. The timing as to when this distinction was to be made among contemporary human populations depended upon the Emerald Covenant negotiations of 1992. Revelation as to this Elohim distinction in the volumes of history that pertain to their involvement in human evolution was conditional upon whether or not the Anu Elohim collectives would choose to abandon their long-held dominion agenda in favor of the Emerald Covenant Co-Evolution Treaty during the 2017 stellar activation cycle. If the fallen Anu Elohim collectives chose to honor co-evolution with the races of Earth, the history of horrors they have intentionally inflicted upon the earthly races would be released more slowly, allowing the Anu Elohim and their interstellar races time to demonstrate their proclaimed good faith within the co-evolution agenda, while allowing the humans of Earth a bit more time to evolve in spiritual maturity, so they would not seek to retaliate against the Anu Elohim races, and especially the earthly human hybrid descendants of the Anunnaki and Anu Elohim, out of revenge for the historical horrors they have visited upon the human race. The founders and Emerald Covenant races were hoping that humanity could be spared a direct and immediate confrontation with the trauma of its past. Such confrontation with the truth of human heritage is ultimately inevitable for final healing to occur, but the blow would be softened if compassion, spiritual strength, forgiveness, and understanding could first be fostered within the human collective prior to facing the enormity of what has transpired on Earth to bring human civilization to its present state of painful limitation and relative amnesia. When the first printing of the Voyager series books occurred in May 1999, historical references pertaining to the Anu Elohim and Anunnaki involvement with Earth were presented in a neutral context, providing the general atmosphere of human evolution, but the gory details were not then revealed. The timing and method for revelation of the details depended upon whether or not the Anu Elohim and their numerous Anunnaki races refused to abandon their intended agenda of destroying the human race of Earth during the 2002 to 2017 SAC. The Anu Elohim created the Anunnaki races about 568 million years ago in reaction to creation of the Elohim human guardian race. The Anunnaki were created with the intention of their race serving as the vessel through which the Christiatic human race would be destroyed to provide the Anu Elohim fallen angeli totalitarian collective with exploitive dominion over 11 dimensions of our time matrix. For many millions of years, the Emerald Covenant races have attempted to cultivate peaceful co-evolution between the human and the Anunnaki races in order to assist both species in fulfilling their original potential of becoming Christed, able to achieve ascension and perpetual life expression races. Various periods in our shared history, many Anunnaki races chose to reclaim their Christiatic potentials through entering the Founders' Emerald Covenant to receive the DNA template, bioregenesis, regeneration. that would allow their vision of freedom from the anti-Christiatic control of the fallen Anu Elohim collective to be actualized. Unfortunately for the Anunnaki races of the Emerald Covenant and for the human races on the Christiatic path who have attempted to help them, the Anu Elohim fallen angelic collectives have done everything in their power to enslave the Anunnaki species and as an expendable tool for human destruction. Historically, the fallen Anu Elohim have consistently put forth great efforts of avert and covert manipulation to prevent the Anunnaki from defecting from the anti-Christiatic agenda in favor of the Founders' Emerald Covenant freedom agenda. In November 1992, the Pleiadian-Sirian agreements emerged through a confrontation between Anunnaki races of the fallen Anu Elohim, competing fallen Anu, Seraphim Anunnaki, and Draconian, Reptilian, and Sectoid races of the Dimension 10 fallen Seraphim collective and the human guardian races of the Emerald Covenant. All interstellar races knew since 22,326 BC that this confrontation was likely to occur during the long anticipated 2017 AD stellar activations cycle. Only humanity has been left in the dark regarding knowledge of these events, precisely due to the interstellar political realities that have existed on Earth since 22,326 BC. The 1992 agreements marked the entry of several previously fallen Anunnaki collectives into the Emerald Covenant following their many thousands of years of covert manipulation of Earth human and Anunnaki human hybrid races. The fallen angelic Anunnaki groups who entered the Emerald Covenant in 1992 after a long history of running manipulative, one world order, anti-Christiatic dominion agendas on Earth are as follows. The Jehovian Sirius A Anunnaki that run Galactic Federation and Ashtar Command. The Archangel Michael, Nephite, Nephilim, Necrometon, Anunnaki hybrid collective of Orion, Alpha Centauri, Sirius A, and Andromeda. The Anu Seraphim Alpha Omega Order Templar Mesoldex. The Thoth Enki Zephelium Zeta Anunnaki collective of Nibiru and Sirius A. The Enoch Jehovian Anunnaki collective of Arcturus and Orion. The Anu Seraphim Pleiadian Samyasi Anunnaki of Alcyon and their Enlil, Odedekron, and Marduk, Necrometon, Niburian allies. In 1992, all of the above Anunnaki groups officially entered the Emerald Covenant in an effort to gain support from Emerald Covenant races in their intended stand against the competing reptile and sectoid Rigelian, Zeta, Zephelium, Omicron, Draconian, Draco Moth, Dragon Moth, so the Draconian Dragon Moth, and Odedekron, Avian, Reptilian, Fallen Seraphim races of Orion. The Necrometon, Andromeda, beetle people, and their Men in Black hybrids, and the Centaur and Marduk, Dramine, Anunnaki Omicron hybrids of Alpha and Omega Centauri. So, yeah, this was a lot of stuff going on here. Tons of stuff. And this is where the Emerald Covenant is broken. As the URA plan goes on, the HARP installation and several other related global facilities will be activated to broadcast a mass frequency fence of photosonic scalar pulse technology that can harness human brainwave patterns via bioneurological blocking into a selected frequency range within which the natural perceptual facilities can be technologically manipulated. The target date for the frequency fence is 2003-2004. Once the stage is set and global human conflict begins, fear and instability has reached its intended peak. The UIR tends to stage a mass landing with Galactic Federation, the Pleiadian-Nibiruaian Anunnaki, the Draco reptilian hybrids of the Omicron Draconian Collective, and a few Rigelian Zetas thrown in for good measure, leading the way. The invading fleets will come in peace as the peacemakers, claiming they're our ancient creator gods and kin who have intervened to protect us from destroying ourselves and our planet. They will present seemingly miraculous cures for cancer and several other diseases, including the plagues they seeded, and provide seemingly amazing technologies for environmental cleanup, the personifications of angels sent from above. If their plan proceeds as intended, the Pope and a collective global religious leaders will gather to inform the public of this great gift from God, seducing the masses to blind subservience to the new angelic world government, a unified humanity in the eyes of God. All of these things are part of the URI strategy to directly and physically infiltrate global human culture. If we allow them to go this far, our United Nations will be welcomed into the fallen Anno-Seraphim, Anunnaki-controlled Federation of Planets, which is a cover name stolen from a once valid Emerald Covenant collective that is now used to refer to territories conquered by the Anno-Seraphim Anunnaki, territories that exist under full Anunnaki totalitarian exploitation and dominion. Then and only then will the final phase of the invasion plan be set in motion. They had plans. Okay. So this is very important. Very important. I'm going to read this. So basically what was happening here, the technology through which humanity can reclaim its freedom and intended heritage during the 2000-2017 SAC, and by which the previously described your One World Order Dominion Academy stopped its tracks, is an internally directed divine science technology called planetary shields clinics. The technical dynamics of planetary shields clinics are beyond the scope of this book. The GA and Azurite Templar security team has been directly engaged in conducting advanced Masters Templar training workshops and active planetary shield clinics since January 2000, with the intention of assisting Earth and humanity in safe passage through the 2000-2017 SAC. As per the 1992 Pleiadian-Sirian agreements, the Anunnaki legions of the Galactic Federation, Ashtar Command, the Pleiadian-Nibiruaian Council, the Alpha Omega Templar Mesoldex, the Thoth Enki Zephelium Zeta, Nibiruaians, the Enoch Jehovian Anunnaki collectives, and the Archangel Michael Nephilim Nephthite collectives were entrusted to assist the GA and Emerald Covenant races in orchestrating planetary shields clinics to ensure a safe 2000-2017 SAC ascension evolution period. Only the Enochian Jehovian Anunnaki collective has thus far remained loyal to that 1992 promise. When the Anunnaki legions defected from the 1992 Pleiadian-Sirian agreements, January 2000, then rendered their final blow of human betrayal in entering the July 5, 2000 Treaty of Voltaire, only to use this temporary status as a means of attempted sabotage against the Azurite security team, then defecting to support the September 12, 2000 Edict of War issued by the GA and Emerald Covenant races have been on red alert and a direct crisis intervention plan has been set in motion. So, if the Anunnaki choose to come to try and reclaim their place on Earth, the Azurite teams will be here to intervene and stop them if it happens. Wow. That's what that was. So, there's a lot of Anunnaki issues going on still in terms of planetary threats and stuff. Seems like the Enki and Lil groups are still around and wanting to get hold of Earth at times. Yeah, so that is this information concerning the Galactic Federation of Worlds and Anunnaki involvement with Earth, Atlantis, Egypt, Ark of the Covenant, crystalline generators. There you go, folks. These two books, Voyager Series 1 and 2, are amazing. There's a lot of stuff on here about the Galactic Federation and the Anunnaki. Like, if I look it up, there's terms still going on in history. So if you can get the books in PDF format, that's the best available format to get them right now, because they're rare collectibles now. Yeah, so thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Namaste.